So a little bit about the team that I'm a part of. Basically, it's a great job, right? So basically, you spend all day doing experiments, experiment after experiment after experiment with whatever basically Gannett wants you to experiment on. So basically, currently, we host an innovation challenge, which I'll go into much greater depth on in just a second. But we also have probably a portfolio of about 6 to 10 active projects at once as well. They can range from anything such as ad blockers, which was brought up earlier, to virtual reality, which obviously we touched on quite a bit today as well. So, with lots of smart people should come the ability to do lots and lots and lots of experimentation all at once, right? So Gannett is basically the size of a small city. So we have about between 11,000 and 15,000 people employed across 80 some odd markets. So that should enable like a lot of great experimentation all at once. So you get to the con of having lots and lots and lots of smart people, right? So smart person, you think they know what's best, right? So without really actually doing a hard consumer check on, hey, is this really a problem worth solving for? They kind of go ahead and do it. Also, with lots and lots and lots of people, I've seen it done over and over again, where like they spend so much time on the smallest details. Like I've seen like a group go days and days and days arguing about the color of a logo. So it's just one of those things where you want to establish, the right framework, and you want to like let people have their freedom. But it's like, wow, come on, let's reel it back in. So, a much younger version of myself always wanted to think about, okay, what is the utopia around internal collaboration, right? So you want to build that sandbox, and you want to have the right rules of engagement within that sandbox. So what is the right communication that you should be speaking? You don't want to like waste a bunch of time rewriting code that somebody else did because they were more comfortable in Drupal versus Java versus whatever the code base may be. So you want this kind of structure around internal collaboration, but obviously, being at a company the size of Gannett, that was really tough. So last year, we did the trendy thing of actually splitting our company into two. Broadcast went on one side. Gannett remained with the newspaper group. And with that, they actually created the lab that I'm a part of. And with the lab, it actually gave me a chance to actually do these innovation challenges. And you'll see a lot of things that Corey mentioned earlier as part of these innovation challenges. And it created that sandbox. So basically what we said to everyone who wanted to enter this challenge was, hey, we really want you to prove that you've uncovered true customer needs and that the solution is at the intersection of desirable, feasible, and viable. So desirable, speaking from the customer perspective, feasible, speaking from the business perspective, or feasible, speaking from the tech perspective, and viable, speaking from the business perspective. So we went through and we trained everyone on design thinking principles, again, many of which Corey just covered, so thank him for getting us closer to happy hour. But we also paired it with a light business framework also, which Corey covered. I don't think he used the word lean canvas, but that's essentially what we use. It's a great lightweight framework to actually make sure that, hey, you have a great idea. Can we actually make a business out of it? So do you have enough revenues to cover your costs? What is your target customer? And what is your unique value proposition? So with this first rollout of the challenge, we made the theme of it rather broad. So basically we asked, as almost everybody in a legacy media company should, how do we diversify our audiences and how do we diversify our revenues? Meaning, how do you target anyone under 50 and how do you basically make money other than actually throwing a bunch of display ads at the product, right? So we did that. We got about 50 entries back from the field. Some were really great, some weren't so great, and others maybe die a little inside. So probably the biggest thing that we actually had to do, which was a little tough, was we actually had to throw out a lot of entries because essentially we realized that not everyone is actually aware of all the different ongoing active projects that are already going on within Gannett. So it was like, they wanted to do stuff around personalization. Guess what? We already have a project around personalization. They wanted to do something about another news app. Guess what? We're actually experimenting on what the future of the USA Today app should be. So it's like there were a lot of good projects, great ideas that we just had to throw out immediately. We try to do the polite, hey, let's introduce you to what this actual active project is actually going on. So kind of a consolation prize. So we went through these 50 projects, we narrowed it down to 10. We got the executive team together, and basically they narrowed the 10 into these 5 finalists. So just a little bit about each one. On the far left, you can basically see that that was a virtual reality, but in a B2B space. So how can we leverage USA Today, as it's known for a great travel publication and travel site? How can we actually turn around B2B experiences that help our travel clientele kind of wrap the experience around what is it like if I actually went on this cruise ship? So actually, a side note on that first project virtually there is that Gannett will be debuting a virtual reality news show in the spring called VR Truly There, so virtually there, get rid of the I. So that'll be exciting, something to look forward to. Retro Indie essentially was an experiment on all of us have such great archives of content. How do we actually take those great archives and content and actually put a new twist on them in order to actually make them sellable and attractive to a new audience? So we're basically taking a lot of the historic photography that we had, overlaying an interesting design, and actually putting them on tote bags, throw pillows, et cetera. Actually, tote bags, who knew? But definitely sold. So HopSpot, obviously taking a look at the craft beer scene and how it's really revving as far as from an industry perspective. HopSpot, obviously there's a lot of apps out there already in the space, but it took an interesting spin on actually looking at the event coverage at the actual local breweries to actually give people, hey, I'm interested in actually experimenting with new beers. Give me something to do to go along with that. The actual winner is kind of in the middle position here. It's called I Am Sport. It basically is a social video brand around actually helping to tell the stories of young athletes and all their dedication and perseverance. So look for that probably to come probably next 3-6 months as another video brand for us. And then the final, the 5th entry was, it ended up being called Mouse. It was basically a look at how do I discover and explore new bands in town, so local bands, right? So how does that format work within an app? It's kind of, they started doing kind of like a Tinder for local musicians. It evolved as a concept a little bit, but in general, how do I find new bands in town? So the biggest learnings actually out of that. So how did we do it, taking some of what Matter does? Now, don't get me wrong. So Matter actually takes it to an entirely new level, but Matter also isn't cheap. Or it isn't free anyway. So it was just kind of like one of those things where how do we start learning internally? And obviously some of these learnings that you probably don't actually see necessarily in a lot of textbook cases. So learning number 1, give anyone who wants to enter this challenge a kick out the door. It's so surprising, like in the industry that we're in, we're actually accused of being too much in the public's face. But when it comes to like innovation challenges or product development, all of a sudden we become massive introverts. And it's like actually difficult to actually get people out the door and participating. So it's, so definitely for the next challenge, we're actually mandating at least 30 customer interviews as part of each innovation challenge. So it's like, hey, if you haven't done your homework, you got to get back out there. So learning number 2. The fear of failure is real. So I think Corey in his closing remarks definitely hit it on the head. Like, unless you actually have an environment where it's okay to fail, you're not going to get very far in the innovation space. So that was a very real outcome of this. And you could tell, like, so people entered this innovation challenge and they viewed it as a competition and they did not want to lose. The problem is that, you know what? This is an innovation culture. Some things just aren't going to materialize. So But just recognize, obviously, fear of failure is real, especially when you put it under your corporate roof. Learning number 3, get help from the outside. So for the parents in the room, I think the analogy fits that at some point, the kids just stop listening to their own parents, right? And it actually takes an outside force or an outside authority to come in and actually kind of wring them by the neck a little bit. So essentially what we did, this is Eric Kester. He is an entrepreneur from DC. We brought him in. He actually did wonders, actually. So he basically, each of the groups presented in front of him and got incredible feedback, and a lot of them pivoted significantly based upon his feedback, even though he was actually saying almost the exact same thing that we were saying internally. So, Mark Cuban's second appearance. Learning number 4, essentially executive involvement. With the good comes the bad. So essentially, we'll talk about the good first. So essentially, we had the executive team actually be the judges in selecting which were the winners of this competition and which moved on and which did not move on. So the good, obviously, you get buy-in, yay. So essentially, we fund the innovation challenge with more than about 6 figures. And essentially, the people writing the check, if they're part of the decision making, it helps guarantee that you're going to go ahead and get that 6-figure involvement from here on out. So then there's the bad, and essentially, a lot of times you can have a wonderful framework on exactly here's how we should be looking at all these great ideas, right? But then somebody kind of gets a gut check on, well, I'm not exactly sure about that. And then especially if the conversation's done as a group, then you actually have like a lot of swirl within the executive team, and essentially it basically becomes, okay, the CEO just spoke, he likes one idea, maybe we should go with that one. Not that that happened in this one, but essentially that can happen. So learning number 5, everyone wins, but not really. So at the pitch day that we had at Gannett, almost each of the teams were asked to actually stay in the competition instead of actually being able to gracefully exit, or somebody being able to say, hey, I won. Basically, they asked for tweaks to their business model, which was fine, but it was just kind of like at pitch day, it was just kind of a letdown, because essentially, a lot of times, if it's done internally, you don't like to hurt feelings, and essentially, you just have to understand that that actually can present a big con on the other side. Now, on the flip side of everyone wins, I do believe that this is something that every organization and every group should be taking a look at, is actually hosting their own innovation challenge or working with Matter, however you guys do it. So from a practical standpoint, if you don't go with Matter, how many in here have ever downloaded Kickbox from Adobe? The Adobe Kickbox? So if you go to kickbox.adobe.com, it's basically an open source materials that you can basically use and actually customize to your own desire. And it basically goes step by step by step by step on exactly what you would actually want to do to actually host your own innovation challenge. Another really good download is if you go to SlideShare and just do a search on New York Times Product Discovery Activity Guide. That particular documentation, it's about 140 pages. It's incredibly thorough, as you can expect from the New York Times, but essentially you can actually take a lot of the good ideas and exercises that it paints and actually and download it and actually reuse probably with some slight tweaks. But essentially at the end of all of this, some of the feedback we got from some of the participants was like, this was the best thing that ever happened to the career. Because essentially, if you're just in a newsroom, like reporting role, it essentially doesn't a lot of times allow you the opportunity to actually really truly explore the marketing, business, advertising aspects. And it basically, it creates a lot of T-shaped people for your organization. So with that, basically, I would recommend this to anyone. And
you did it.
Pretty close. Pretty close.
Any questions? Any questions? So are you going to go for a round 2?
Yeah. So we're actually, we just completed round 1. Round 2, we're looking at themes around immersive storytelling, as well as looking at themes around helping small and medium businesses. So we're going to take the theme, shift it a little bit, making it a little bit more specific, and just see what the outcome is.
Even though you didn't have like a clear winner, was the overall feedback that you got that people were more jazzed about the opportunities within their day-to-day workflow?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, again, it definitely rose to the top of what they've actually had as far as opportunities before in Gannett. And actually, it gets some face time of individual participants to get in front of the executive team that they would never have gotten before. So definitely, and I Am Sport, the video social brand, actually was declared, quote, the winner, and it will actually receive funding to go on.
And will that live on all products within Gannett?
Yeah, so Gannett has already rolled out one video brand called Humankind. That basically is kind of a little similar in the sense that it basically it's social video stories about people doing good. It's basically probably going to live under that same organization.
Anybody else have questions? Anyone else have questions? Oh, yep, hang on just a second. Sorry.
What was the New York Times thing?
So if you do a search on SlideShare for New York Times Product Discovery Activity Book, no, it's long, but yeah. So it's basically, it's a ton of different exercises. It actually gives you kind of the time involved, the level of difficulty, and just a description of what each is supposed to accomplish. So.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Kevin, thank you very much.